Now's the time to finally realize we the people must make some choices. If we want single-payer health care, now's the time to raise our voices till they hear us in the halls of Congress and behind the White House door that we're sick and tired of getting sold out and won't take it anymore.
So first, welcome everybody. To acknowledge that Washington State contains the traditional territory of the many Native American peoples. Their presence pervades the lands and waters surrounding us. May we nurture our relationship with our Native neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today. So now we're going to start the report back from the Chicago meeting and our delegation that went there. I think we had the largest delegation, and I think, Gleb, we probably had the most students, right?
I think Florida was pretty close. I think they had like 10.
Anyway, it was really great to have all these students here. And okay, so it was very, very busy day Saturday all day long, but it was good, and I think we got a lot done. And there's also quite a bit of useful slideshows and other things that I'll just show a couple things tonight. Well, you'll be able to download from our website. Really, really great slideshows to use in your work. I think there's 4 of them. These are the triple aims, which is how PNHP National wants to run forward in 2025. This was, I think it was Ed Weisberg showed this and talked about it, and the National has some audio for it that they're going to sync up, but it may take them a while. So these are the triple aims: single payer and profiteering, improved traditional Medicare, that we're going to be pushing as our strategy in next year. So end profiteering, Medicare Advantage, we want to end that. I mean, not end it, but slow it down and, have Medicare, traditional Medicare, more or less overtake it.
Cello, usually they put up all the slide decks from the meeting on the national website.
Okay.
Bunch of bricks came down, and he says this is what happened after our election. So basically, because of the election, we need even more member growth, fundraising and grants, legislative relationships, and advocacy, or whatever on the right side here. Fast through this, but you'll be able to download this and see it. And so this is about what's going to happen in Washington and Chicago. This is another thing that's important, and there's a Coalescence group that's getting together, I think, every couple of weeks, which is a group of, I don't know, 20 organizations or so that are meeting to talk about strategy and fighting back. And PNHP National is one of them, and these are some of the other ones. And actually, Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action right here in Washington State is one of them. So,
And in terms of National Nurses United, Rose Roach was there too, who was the speaker at our healthcare summit in September.
Has PNHP National, how successful have they been in wooing the unions?
well, it's a physicians organization, so they work in coalition with other organizations that include unions, including Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action has a ton of unions in them. Labor Campaign for Single Payer is another one. So basically, we want to build up our coalitions.
I forgot the name of the union, but it's the largest physician resident union, CIRS, I think. But they had a pretty, thank you. And they had a pretty big presence this year at the summit with a couple of speakers and I believe their president as well.
Yeah, their president was on the panel.
So I want to show you Adam Gaffney gave his health policy update slideshow, which he does every year, which is a really good resource for individuals looking at it and learning a whole lot, or if you're going to give a talk somewhere, you can pull out some of those slides.
Right. And just to remind everybody that those slide decks are available to anyone who's a PNHP member. So you'll be able to download those and use those slides right off of the national website. Adam Gaffney is a former president of PNHP, and he is on the Harvard faculty and practices, I think, at Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, which is kind of the poor working class area and hospital in Boston. He's an internal medicine specialist. Amazing guy. He's brilliant.
Now, I guess when I was talking about unions in terms of partnership, I was thinking about the way that healthcare is a human right. Washington has been so successful in courting, the locals like UAW and the Federation of Retired State Employees. And I was just curious if the national PNHP had done any outreach into the AC, what's it called? ACO?
ACL, God, now I'm blocking.
That one. Have they done any outreach? Have they been successful? Have they, in terms of allies? Because it feels to me that we can't get single payer nationally until we get the unions on board.
Right. I think they have, but they don't emphasize it as much as I think as we did at the summit.
Okay.
Now David's showing us the Adam Gaffney's slides, which is a collection of mostly the literature with data that supports what this current state of affairs are.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a whole lot of slides here, but there's a whole lot of information. You can really use it to educate yourself about the latest statistics.
Oh yeah, the Seward Health catastrophe. Yeah.
Administrative waste.
Well, there we go. Administrative waste. BRI, my favorite topic.
Is he yet?
What deck was that?
That's Adam Gaffney's health policy updates.
Hi, everyone. Reporting in from Butte, Montana. So you wanted us to talk about the Friday session as well as the Saturday sessions that we attended?
Yeah, that would be good. We can go back to that since we kind of skipped it over. But anyway, the students who were there on Friday can just talk about what you guys talked about.
Saturday was the student summit, and that was a great session. I feel like you guys may have discussed that already. Always lots of energy with the students, and be open and honest and forthright. It has a different vibe from the PNHP meeting. And we had our Friday session at Roosevelt University. And just lots of updates, particularly around the recent election, Lots of discussion around like community building and just advocacy in general. Not so much heavy discussion around like health policy and health metrics as well. I know that was like more usually reserved for the Saturday session. But for Saturday, I attended two sessions in particular. The first one was on moral injury. I think this really focused on the moral injury that we experience as healthcare providers and what we're starting to experience as medical students as well in really trying to provide the best care for our patients and advocating for our patients in the clinic or in the hospital, and how that can be how that comes in direct conflict with some of the financialization of the healthcare industry. So, we opened that session just talking about some personal instances of moral injury that we personally experienced. Maybe not so much like related to the financialization, but really just like, tapping into like what we've experienced as medical students so far. I shared my experience in working at UW at Monthl on my internal medicine rotation, and kind of some of the difficult morals that were experienced when sharing a terminal diagnosis with a patient, but unfortunately having to do so to somebody who does not speak English, and having to use like a tablet interpreter to share a terminal diagnosis with the patient. And kind of relating, unpacking that and relating that to what other people have experienced with kind of the profit motive in the healthcare industry. That patient, by the way, did not have health insurance. So kind of going through that journey of sharing that diagnosis and undergoing at least initial treatment in the hospital, all while like hospital administrators were scrambling to try to find a way for them to pay for their care. The second session that I attended was on communicating effectively. This was an interesting session because, to be honest, like it opened up just discussing like there's like a survey that's being circulated by PNHP National, really talking about actually focusing again on moral injury that healthcare providers experience, whether that's spending too much time on EHR or not having resources available to you. It was kind of interesting. It felt like we didn't really cover too much on like communicating effectively. It was really just revolving around the survey. And unfortunately, during the discussion, some of the PNHP members really got into like the ethics of having a survey without IRB approval or ethics approval. Some others weighing in and being pretty vocal about how the survey is set up or how they're collecting data and how that could introduce bias into the results, and kind of more like researchy, wonky stuff, and not so much about, collecting data and how to effectively communicate. So that was an interesting session. Didn't spend too much time, not too many big takeaways there. And then of course there was the evening session, the talk with Congresswoman Jayapal. Was fantastic as always. I've heard her speak before, so
I'm going to show some video on that.
Great. I'm done with that.
Another towards the end, I'll put up another slideshow that talks about PNHP's plans for 2025, and this moral injury survey is going to play an important role in there because PNHP got a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to fund this, and they plan to have, I think, 1,000 to 2,000 survey responses, and then publish that similar to the two big research studies they published in the last year or so on their profits, our health, their profits, that showed Medicare Advantage plans are getting overpaid. And what was the other one?
The harms report, yeah.
The harms report, yeah. So this is going to be another one along those lines, but it's funded by Robert Wood Johnson. So it's an important thing that's going to happen. And they hope to have that published similar to what they did the other two in the fourth quarter of 25.
Yeah, and I think there was lots of discussion during that second session just about like them not having like ethics approval, which is a big deal if you're going to be disseminating that data, especially collecting data from individuals, even in a survey. They were collecting like name, title, like where you live, etc. So there's lots of ethics that need to be involved with that. It's actually a requirement for some of this research. So he gave them some feedback. I think Gleb gave them some direct feedback, but also lots of feedback in that session from some of the PNHP members from across the U.S.
One of the ideas to follow up with people who complete the surveys to get them to join PNHP, Anyway, let's move on here for a second.
But there was a lot of discussion at the board meeting on Sunday about those issues, John, and they're going to clean some of those up, particularly the data collection of the personal data, and make sure that those are separate. But I'd encourage everybody to take the survey. They're only going to use practicing physicians' input in the data analysis. But even if you're retired, they would still like you to fill it out. And then I just mentioned parenthetically, if any of you want background on this concept of moral injury, which formerly known as burnout, right, which kind of puts the onus on the individual who's having problems. This concept of moral injury was introduced, well, actually popularized by a physician named Wendy Dean. If you look up Wendy Dean, the first article that was published was an online journal newsletter called Stat. So if you just do Wendy Dean Stat, and then she ended up writing a book about it under the same title with pretty exhaustive treatise with a lot of vignettes.
I'm trying to draw up this other slideshow here that was given by these really fun twins that they're medical students, right? Hugh?
Yes. Yeah, I think they're both medical students at Chicago Medical School.
And they
Swami and Swarthy.
They gave a report on Medicare Advantage. Let's see. Yeah, here it is, I think.
They admitted that the really groovy slides were done by Ed Weisbart. Ed used to work as medical director of Express Scripts, which is a software company, and he said he had to travel a lot, and basically he oversaw the medical issues for the software, but a lot of what he did was sales, and that's where he got really good at PowerPoint.
So are you seeing this now with
Yep.
Okay, fighting Medicare Advantage? Okay. So here's PNHP's triple aim again. So this is talking mostly about Medicare Advantage and stuff that you can use to educate yourself again, or use in a talk that you might give or whatever. So this is a really
That last slide though was the killer, I think. David, if you back up one.
This one.
And it's how stock prices in the major Medicare Advantage companies skyrocketed after Trump got elected.
David, go back one slide, maybe.
I don't know if I can.
Just
Just
push
hit your
the
left arrow.
button. Yeah, push the right arrow on your computer.
There you go.
There you go.
So there you go. United Health Group, CVS Health, and Humana, the top 3 providers of Medicare Advantage plans. Look at what their stock did on November 7th. Just shot through the roof.
Anyway, you guys should be able to have these slideshows on your computer in the next couple days.
David, did you say that there was going to be audio for some of these as well?
Particularly Adam Gaffney's, and I don't know if they're going to do audio for all of them, but they really should. And I asked Matt about that, and he said they're going to do it. I think it was for the health policy update, but they will. Maybe they'll do them for others too.
David, just out of curiosity, well, I wanted to ask the medical students here. So I'm really curious about, some of the education that we've been receiving formally as part of the curriculum about like the healthcare financing and healthcare system, or even exposure to discussing Medicare Advantage. I know our class received like minimal teaching on like Medicare Advantage. I'm curious about Pacific Northwest University, and I think at University of Washington in particular, they've incorporated a little bit more of that. Hugh, I know you've had some conversations with Karen Segerson. Omar, I don't know if you want to weigh in, because I think you and Jayland in your class, they received a little bit more, and then I think the E24s, the first year class right now, they've received even more than the year prior.
Yeah, you're right, and I think we still need to contact like our MHS offices to kind of perhaps like have more sessions about this, and like can present this like new info almost like that. It's just like not necessarily discussed as like this depth of details that I feel like students should get. So perhaps like yes, I think for the E24s or like maybe the E25s as well. It's like hopefully we're gonna have more of that in MHS sessions.
And thanks to you, John, for lobbying. I'm in contact with the course at UW is called Medicine, Health, and Society, and it's going to run the week of March 17th. And with John's lobbying, the course director has asked me to join her in planning that week.
Oh, excellent.
Okay.
It was good to have an insider in the curriculum.
Trying. Thank you for the help.
So in the afternoon, there were workshops, and 7 workshops, and I don't think we have time to go talk about any ones in particular. I think John already did one of them about the moral injury, but I can just
Can I ask the students a question? What were your guys' main take-homes from the conferences, if that's okay for me to ask that?
Perhaps one of the main takeaways of these conferences. Also, this is my first PNHP conference that I attend, and it was a great experience for me because I feel like as a student, like we need to kind of learn how to lobby and advocate and organize behind our like demands, and what we advocate for is like, so for example, like I learned in the session where we talk about the labor movement or unionization from Dr. like Taylor Walker, like how to unionize, how to mobilize, how to have collective power, and how to apply pressure when needed. And I feel like these kind of tactics and strategies, like for me as a student, is very helpful because our movement has a lot of obstacles and a lot of like challenges when it comes like in public policy or like small organizations. So for me, my biggest takeaway really, it's the skills I learned and the information I learned about like our current like movement lobbying for a single payer like universal system. So that's my biggest takeaway. I learned a lot from the speakers and the strategies and ways I could contribute.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as Omar was. I learned a lot about just kind of how the system and program worked. I had an idea of what Medicare Advantage was kind of going into this, and that's only because of my previous work experience. Aside from that, I really haven't gotten any exposure. So learning more about what Medicare Advantage was so that I'm able to talk to other people and explain why our system is really messed up rather than just the whole people don't have health insurance, but giving like specific details and examples why. I feel like I now have like a stronger grasp on it and a better way to talk to other people. And then just with it in general, I feel like I did learn a lot of those advocacy skills. What can I do as a student right now to kind of help work in the right direction? And then just kind of skills in general, not even applying to the topic of universal healthcare or single payer system, but it just things that we want to advocate for in general. Like on the SNaHP conference, we did a lot of like building testimony and how to talk to congressmen, legislature stuff. And I did one workshop on like talking to conservatives and how we're trying to meet like a middle ground, things like that. So I think it was just a good way to learn overall how to build ourselves as advocates, and then also how as students, what we can do now about the Medicare Advantage and Medicare for All.
Yeah, I went to one session that was about campaign building, and it was really cool they really like taught us like how like every step of the way on how to get something done. But what I really took away from that session was all of the like local things that were happening. All of these students were getting super excited about making change in their own community. And so I think it got conversation started in our local in our SNaHP group of like, what does Yakima need? What do we need to do like in Yakima right now? And one thing I really appreciated that they said in this breakout session was like anything that we are doing to get people healthcare, to get healthcare more accessible is working towards a single payer. And that was really encouraging to me because sometimes like, the national goal is so big and scary. And so just to think of like any local thing that we make progress in is progress towards the big goal.
I think my overarching idea is why are we not talking about this? Kind of answer John's question as well, is that at least in our curriculum, it's not as talked about as other topics. Like I feel like we're so busy learning the clinical like content of, different systems that we really lose the clinical practice of it all. And so I guess I learned a lot and like how to communicate. But I think the biggest thing that I took is that we were very privileged to go to this conference and we learned so many skills. And I feel almost a responsibility to take the information that we learned and at least for our community, bring it back to our cohort of first, second, third, and fourth years to kind of get the ball rolling and like make these future physicians aware of what's happening and what they're bound to be impacted by.
Beautiful.
Yeah, really echoing what everyone's been saying about like the lessons from the workshops and everything. I think in my perspective, having gone to like the Atlanta conference as well, I think I definitely noticed there's a tone and priority shift compared to last year. I think this year I definitely appreciated that the organization is prioritizing like coalition and organizing building in a way that I didn't really appreciate last year. I mean, it was still there, but like not to like this level of emphasis. In particular, when it comes to like unions, like getting residents to unionize. And I think also creating like this single payer advocate pipeline. I heard the Heritage Foundation was mentioned multiple times in terms of how they've like garnered conservatives in multiple different fields. And I think PNHP recognized that there's a lot of value in really investing in our SNaHP chapters, really trying to get every single school in our country involved. And I thought that was really cool. Oh, another thing I also appreciated was that PNHP, I feel like I didn't really notice it in Atlanta, but this year I feel like they gave somewhat of a platform to like single payer advocacy and like in state-based initiatives. Like we had like a whole table during the lunch for folks who wanted to talk about state-based advocacy. And I thought that was really cool because personally I'm in the camp that I think advocating for state single payer systems can be really valuable, but I didn't really feel like it was talked about last year. So I really appreciated that.
We can thank Mike Huntington for a lot of that change. Mike is a tireless advocate of state-based change, and Mike did a lot of work organizing and pressuring the board to pay more attention. And many of you don't know, but what was it, 3 years ago? There was a major discussion and riff among the PNHP community about how much efforts we should expend on state-based versus national, because given that our energies are perhaps a zero-sum phenomenon. Mike, I don't know if you want to mention anything.
Well, one of the slideshows does have slides about state-based organizing in Florida, where they got their congressional representatives to back it in the House, where there's I think there's a bill there.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only reference I saw to it, other than in the board meeting. We just talked briefly about it, in that the national is going to keep pushing, the national Improve Medicare for All, but is not going to do anything to, denigrate state-based. But leaders felt they couldn't come out and support it. They're just going to kind of be neutral on it right now, or not make any statements on it. But again, like in the last year's board meeting, just about everybody around the table is working on it one way or another with their people in their states, working on coalitions, particularly states like have a state-based bill. And it's really a great tool for coalition building. And those working on state base, they're always pushing for national at the same time. So they're working on two things. But there wasn't really a general session on it or made any reference to it at the general meetings. Isn't that true, Mike?
Right. I think even though every board member is probably supportive, the reluctance may have a bit to do with respected former leaders that feel that the state-based is a Jim Crow, it's balkanizing the South, it will drain the Medicare Trust Fund, all of which is untrue, but it's an amygdala response. And we went back and forth in Common Dreams. Kay Tillow and Anna Malino put an article in April in Common Dreams criticizing state-based, and then several of us wrote a rebuttal in Common Dreams July 1st. And I'll see if I can get those two references in the chat so you can look at what they said and then what we said. They are the National Single Payer Group, and in their principles is that state-based is wrong-headed in their principles. But we are very closely aligned on everything else, stopping the privatization of Medicare and ACO REACH. So PSARA has been good at allowing us to join our heads together talking about that issue, even though we disagree on state-based approach so far anyway.
Now, one thing I just wanted to highlight, really for me about this meeting, and this is, I think, the sixth national meeting that I've been to or so. I was pretty heavily involved as a pre-medical student as well, but I think one of the big takeaways, and I think this is reaffirmed year after year, is really the pressing need to equip the next generation of physicians and doctors with the advocacy skills that they need, not only to like push the agenda, but also get seated into positions of power. There's already like doctors in Congress and in the Senate, and it's just unfortunate that there's a number of them who really don't align with what is best for their patients in the long run, or with their constituents in the long run, their former patients. I think that's really exemplified by. I think the need for that is really exemplified today with the announcement of the second Trump administration, with Dr. Oz being nominated for director of CMS. So doctor, it's just the wrong doctor, right? So we need to be thinking, really wisely and really pushing and equipping and uplifting the next generation. And, doing so with the financial means and financial support is definitely always greatly appreciated. Shout out to the George Martin Scholarship Fund. But also, I think giving tools to the current students and even young practicing doctors and also making space for them to really speak in these halls of power and step up into these positions. And yes, TV celebrities should not be in office.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me?
Yes, Munif.
Hey, sorry for getting a bit late. Just wanted to jump off John's point, and something I really thought was a good move during the conference this year is I feel like there was greater involvement from, I believe it was the Physicians Union, CIR, I believe. They kind of took the lead with leading the SNaHP summit by giving like the introductory talks. And I think that's kind of is like a good sign from my perspective, because it really gives us an impression of, you know, the type of movement that we can be involved with, you know, as soon as we become residents and things like that, like a younger age. So
I want to move on here a little bit and first just say that for me, the best part of Saturday was the panel discussion where they had 5 people talking about reacting to the election, opportunities and challenges ahead. I don't have any video of that. I hope that PNHP National did videotape that one.
Oh, I hope so too. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Second thing is I want to show a little bit of Pramila's keynote speech after the dinner. And I think I can keep that up now. And then the last thing, the slideshow that talks about PNHP's plans for 2025. Let me see if I can figure this out.
Your leadership. I'm so excited that you are going to be the next president of PNHP. Let's give it up for Bill Chief. I also want to thank outgoing President Phil Vorhoff for his steadfast leadership. It's been such a joy to work with you. And I want to give a special shout out to the PNHP Advisory Board and also our Washington State PNHP chapter. And all the people in the House from Washington State, you get a special shout out tonight. It's really wonderful. I also want to congratulate all the awardees. It's so inspiring to hear about the work that you all have done and just to know that your leadership is here. Also, I just loved meeting all the students that I've had a chance to say hi to tonight. So special shout out to all the students who are here tonight. You give us so much hope. And you're right, it's not just that you're the future, you are the present. And you are making such a difference. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be with you tonight and to have PNHP and all the entire coalition of organizations as such a key partner in our fight to reform our broken healthcare system and fight for a single payer system. Your work on the ground to organize a bigger movement for a single payer healthcare system has been absolutely critical to all the progress we've made. I'm an organizer, for those of you who know me. 20 years before coming to Congress, I was an organizer on the outside. Now I'm an organizer on the inside. I feel like it is this work on the ground that actually makes a difference. And your engagement and your commitment to speak up clearly at our press conferences, in events, in Congress, about what it means to be a provider in a broken healthcare system, how difficult it is to do the real work of real medicine that you all signed up for, has really helped us to personalize this, to tell the stories of people on the ground who deserve healthcare and aren't getting it, and the providers who deserve to be able to provide it, and yet you're coming up against all these barriers. So thank you so much for all of that work. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk just about some of the wins we've had, and Biljit mentioned some of them, but I think it's important as organizers, I find anyway, that we always are on to the challenges. We don't really celebrate the wins. And I think it's important, given that we're going to be moving into a very challenging environment over the next several years, that we just take a little bit of time to celebrate you all and to celebrate the work that we've been able to do. Particularly, I want to talk about the entire single-payer coalition focusing effort on stopping the privatization of Medicare. We know that this is one of the biggest threats to any progress towards a real universal healthcare system. Just destroying Medicare without people even really understanding what's happening. And that's how I think about all of these programs that you all have been helping to fight back against. We've had some real collective successes in our work to end the direct contracting program, a major threat to traditional Medicare coverage, hidden in layers of bureaucracy, as well as our work to significantly roll back the subsequent iteration of this, which was more gently called the ACO REACH program. You worked, as Diljit said, very closely with us to promote your important research. In my letter with Senator Warren to CMS Administrator Brooks LaSure, calling for an end to the ACO REACH program and highlighting just how corrupt a program it really is shaping up to be. And at the beginning of President Biden's first term, you all worked with us as we led what I think is probably the most successful push we've had on Capitol Hill to really push back against what I call Medicare disadvantage. I don't call it Medicare Advantage, I call it Medicare disadvantage, because we don't want people to think that this is an advantageous system. It's not. It really draws people in, promises them things, and then doesn't provide it, and makes a lot of money in the process. For the first time in Congress, we were able to stop the private insurance companies from being able to send the letter that they send every year, with many members of the Progressive Caucus, by the way. We were able to stop that by doing a whole set of panels on Medicare disadvantage, on the profiteering in it, on what was happening. We brought in experts, and it was a fantastic opportunity and a really deep conversation that led to us then being able to stop the letter that they normally send, the private insurance companies, and then push the letter that we were able to send and get 60 members of Congress, which, you know, is a big number in Congress, to get 60 members of Congress to sign on. And that's not to mention all of the work that you all have done on our North Star of Medicare for All. I am so proud to be the lead sponsor of Medicare for All. It is really, truly one of the joys when I was, I came out very early for Bernie Sanders in 2016 and then was his health policy chair in 2020, and Medicare for All has been my North Star in terms of really thinking about what we need to take care of ourselves as individuals and as a country. And just think, in the last 2 years alone, thanks to your work, I counted, if the website is correct, you can correct me if it's not, but I counted 19 local jurisdictions have passed resolutions calling for Medicare for All. From Texas to Ohio, Florida to Maryland, New York to California, Massachusetts to Colorado. And it's really been fantastic. And this Congress, thanks to the work of so many in our coalition and our inside organizing, we had 113 co-sponsors on the Medicare for All bill. That is more than half of the Democratic caucus. And we were actually able to keep the same number of members of Congress on the bill, even though we had a smaller minority than we did a majority in the Congress before. Now, since I became the lead sponsor of the improved Medicare for All bill in the House back in 2018, we've also continued to make progress on just moving the conversation within Congress. We held the first ever powerful hearings on Medicare for All. God bless Adi Barkan, who was just so incredible at those hearings. And every year, we're able to get more and more sponsors on the bill. I also set up a Medicare for All caucus, and we've used that caucus, including during the pandemic, to bring experts from all over the world to talk to members of Congress about healthcare systems in other parts of the world. It is not inconceivable. It is not crazy. This is the system. Many countries around the world that are in our economic conditions, are able to pass a universal healthcare system. And so it was really important for us to be able to do that, and also to have shadow hearings of the impact of our broken healthcare system in that horrible pandemic, where we lost so many people and such a disproportionate burden on people of color and poor people in this country who died at such disproportionate rates. Even under a president that was not for Medicare for All, we worked collectively to build support for expanding Medicare as one strategy to getting to Medicare for All. So finally, dental, vision, and hearing actually made it into a bill thanks to the Progressive Caucus that held the line and passed Build Back Better through the House of Representatives. Now, unfortunately, the Senate couldn't pass it, despite the support of 99% of Democrats in the House. The Senate and the White House, but the fact that we got it into legislation, passed it through the House, is actually really, really important. Also, one of the most popular economic proposals of the Harris-Walz campaign, as you might recall, was the addition of a long-term care benefit into Medicare. And every room I went to, and I was in swing states for the 8 weekends before the election, every single weekend in a different swing state, and every room I went to where I mentioned that, the room went crazy with cheering and applause, because everyone is dealing with, in different ways, how to take care of their most vulnerable, their elders, their loved ones, and recognizing that it is incredibly difficult to do that, to have that care, to have that economic ability to do that. It's worth remembering that it was only 6 years ago, when I took over the Medicare for All bill, that we were actually able to even introduce long-term care into the Medicare for All bill. That was the first time that Medicare for All included long-term care. And I think it's really important to think about the fact that for such a huge program to make it to the mainstream Democratic nominee's presidential campaign in just 6 years is a remarkable thing, and you deserve a lot of credit for helping us get there. On the electoral side, it occurred to me that we need more incentives to help candidates who are running for office be comfortable embracing and fighting for Medicare for All. And so I set up a Medicare for All PAC several years ago that's funded by small dollar donations. And because of that, I've been able to help provide funding for candidates in their campaigns to actually embrace Medicare for All. And because of that, we've had a number of frontline candidates, people who run in the toughest districts across the country, who have actually embraced Medicare for All, have signed on to the bill, who talk about it over and over again. And I think that has been really important. And through the PAC, we worked with experts in California, maybe some of you are in the room, to nationalize the Medicare for All calculator, which was developed in California, to help make it so that it could be used anywhere in the country, so that when you're talking to people, you can pull out your phone and you can actually show people what they would save if they went on a Medicare for All program. So I hope that you will take a look at that calculator if you're not already using it. It's a great tool to be able to have a conversation with people about what they actually pay right now and what they would pay under a single payer system. So these wins are slower and smaller than we all would like. But that's good, because we're visionaries and we don't get everything we want the next day. But we know how to work for it. That's what organizing is. And so this work that you and the entire coalition of single-payer advocates have been doing are really the reason that we have made this progress. And before we get to the election, I want you to remember that and give yourselves a huge round of applause, because those are big victories. Of all the rooms in the country, this is a room that understands how badly we need single-payer healthcare. You are on the front lines. You see it every day, and I am so grateful for that work. You are in this broken system, trying to provide care, trying to take care of people. Just imagine this. The average premium for single coverage has gone up 25% in the past 5 years. That's at a higher pace than inflation. The average family is paying more than $25,000 per year on their premium. That is 24% higher than it was in 2019. All of the subsidies that we in the government have endeavored to provide to make healthcare more affordable have certainly helped to lower the cost of premiums for the most vulnerable, but that is a relatively small group of people in the grand scheme of things. And those subsidies have gone into the pockets of the private insurance companies, who then raise the premiums for everybody else. So they still make the same amount of money or more, even though we're providing these subsidies. Today in the United States, half of all adults say that they find it difficult to afford the cost of healthcare. And 1 in 4 have skipped or postponed coverage because of the cost, with sometimes life-threatening consequences that you see every day in your work. In fact, while we're covering more people than before, thanks to some of our efforts as Democrats in Congress, the underinsured is the new giant category of uninsured. And I said this morning on television on MSNBC, if you heard me, I was making this point that we have, yes, we can say that we're covering more people in the United States, more people have health insurance, that's a good thing. But the people that have health insurance are still not getting the health care they need. They are underinsured. They're still using GoFundMe campaigns and other ways of raising money to pay for health care. Our choice, and it is a choice, to remain as the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care for all means that 85 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. And we now spend twice as much per capita on healthcare than virtually any other country. While 1 out of 4 Americans cannot afford the life-saving medicine their doctors prescribe, in 2022, 10 of the top pharmaceutical companies in the United States made over $112 billion, billion with a B, billion dollars in profits, and the top 50 executives in these companies made a combined $1.5 billion in total compensation. Yeah, you can boo. Yeah. Big boo, yeah, exactly. Let's just be very clear that the only people that are benefiting from the status quo are the private, for-profit insurance companies, big pharma and medical equipment suppliers who then spend billions of dollars in our election to ensure that the system stays in place while sacrificing the health, well-being, and lives of hundreds of millions of Americans. Shame. We know, this room certainly, but even the country knows that Medicare for All would save the American people and our entire healthcare system $650 billion each year. And that is according to the Congressional Budget Office, who actually looked at this and evaluated how much we would save if we moved to a Medicare for All system similar to the bill that I lead. That would also improve the economy. It would eliminate all out-of-pocket healthcare costs. And so the question really is, we know where we're trying to go, but how do we get there? Especially given what just happened in the elections last week. Donald Trump's sweeping electoral victory to become our next president, and the serious challenges before us with what is going to be a Republican trifecta in the White House, Senate, and the House, are going to be a massive step backwards, and that's an understatement in every possible way. I don't think I can fully envision what that is going to look like, even though I already went through 4 years. I was elected the same night as Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and I remember being very nervous about not knowing what to do as a member of Congress, having a bit of imposter syndrome as I came in as the first South Asian American woman and one of only 25 naturalized citizens and one of only 87 women of color to have ever served in the United States Congress since the history of our country. And the first thing that I did was respond to Donald Trump's Muslim ban. And I got myself a bullhorn and went to the airport and gathered up a bunch of my organizers, and we had 500, 600 people at the airport, and I threatened to shut down the airport if we couldn't bring the plane back from the tarmac, which was going to deport people simply because they were Muslim. And I thought, well, I know how to do this. This is just organizing. So look, we've been through this, but these are going to pose big new challenges. Trump's Project 2025 clearly laid out their plans to privatize Medicare, to, quote, restructure HHS and CDC, to add work requirements to Medicaid, to further strip reproductive health care, among many, many horrible things. And if their plans come to fruition, our already broken healthcare system will crumble, and everyday people will bear the burden of that. So over the next several years, our work will necessarily and importantly be to stop the worst of what is happening, if we can. I want to be clear, we may not be able to. We're not going to have the House, even though it's going to be very, very close. Those numbers are still out. I think we could be at 214 or 215 for Democrats in the House, which means that Republicans would only have a 2 or 3 vote margin at most. And because Donald Trump has nominated a couple of Republicans to be in his cabinet, it means that they will lose those people, and we might have 3 or 4 months where those seats have to be filled, where we will literally have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, or just a very slim majority. So there will be some time at the beginning of next year in particular where there may be some opportunities and certainly some big fights. We are going to have defensive fights to fight against the worst things that come up, and there will be moments when we can use those fights to highlight our vision for progress for Americans to be able to get the health care they need, and contrast that against their vision of providing tax cuts to the wealthiest billionaires, the biggest pharmaceutical companies, stripping health care away from people. That's the contrast we're going to have to really lean into and make in those moments, and that will come up with the tax fight around April of next year when they try to extend Trump's tax scam, the big tax cuts that they passed in 2017. Now, at the same time, we need to do the hard work of rebuilding the Democratic Party so that we are clear about what we actually stand for and what and how we intend to deliver to working people and poor people across this country if we get chances at the majority again. Our values should drive this. How we help Americans have trust in us again. How we become the party of peace again, not war. And yes, how we ensure that people have fair wages and benefits and rights on the job and health care. This is also a time that I think we need to use to educate the American people about what our vision is for a healthcare system that provides universal and comprehensive care and puts people over profit. That education will be absolutely essential to withstanding all of the attacks that I'll talk about in a minute. Now, the good news is that the election did show us that people are not rejecting our populist, popular, progressive ideas. In fact, just witness the fact that in several states that voted for Donald Trump, voters went around their Republican legislatures and they passed minimum wage ballot initiatives, right? Raised the minimum wage to $15. Which I feel very proud about because Seattle became the first major city in the country to pass a $15 minimum wage. That was 10 years ago, and I was on that committee that did that. Also, in those same Trump states that went for Trump, voters went to the ballot and passed paid leave as well. Very popular across the country. And of course, in 7 states, including 4 states that went for Donald Trump, it would have been 5 if Florida had been a simple majority, voters passed abortion access. And we did still elect Democratic senators in places like Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada, even if we lost the top of the ticket in those places. And in the House, we're adding to our ranks a fabulous, great incoming group of 9 new progressive members to Congress. I hope you check them out. They're really fabulous, fantastic, inspiring. Another proof point is the polling that my Medicare for All PAC did in a number of battleground states in late September. We actually initiated this polling because we were worried that with the Vice President coming in and her past support for Medicare for All, that people would start attacking Medicare for All. And we wanted to figure out what are the most compelling arguments we make in swing states against some of those attacks. And so just 6 weeks before the election, we did this polling, and the results we got, I'll share a couple with you tonight, are really important for our strategy moving forward and our organizing. So we polled likely voters in 7 decisive battleground states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. What did we find? Most important, Medicare for All was actually more popular than Vice President Harris in every one of the states. Medicare for All received 55% support, while Vice President Harris received 49% support. The voters in these states who happen to decide the presidential election year in and year out, are actually incredibly hostile to corporate giants who control their healthcare. Voters rated insurance companies, big corporations, and especially prescription drug companies with intense negativity. In fact, Republican voters gave slightly lower marks to Big Pharma than even Democratic voters did this year, although not by much. Now, in particular, 85% of Black voters, 77% of voters of color in swing states support Medicare for All. So many of the voters that Democrats lost ground on this year are strongly in favor of Medicare for All. Young voters from 18 years to 39 years old support Medicare for All at 62%. 74% of Latino voters, 52% of non-college educated voters. So this is really the Democratic coalition as it existed, certainly before the results of this election. But even beyond our base, Medicare for All actually received 63% support from voters that describe themselves as moderates, and 57% support from those who describe themselves as independents. So I tell you this because I think it's very important to know that we have this support, and I'm going to get to some areas of concern in a second. As expected, existing Medicare and Medicaid programs have net positive ratings amongst all voters across all parties, races, classes, and ages. Battleground state voters also overwhelmingly support a wide variety of policies to expand Medicare and lower healthcare costs, even if they may not be fully there on Medicare for All as a whole. So just imagine, 92% of voters, that's just about everyone. In a poll, you don't get better than 92%. 92% of voters support expanding drug price negotiations for everyone, right? 85% support expanding Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing. 67% support allowing anyone of any age to buy into a Medicare plan. 66% of voters support lowering the Medicare eligibility age to 60. So the key piece here is that there are all these elements of expanding Medicare towards the goal of Medicare for All that is a really important strategy for us to incorporate and integrate into our organizing. Now, when it came to supporting Medicare for All, voters were most excited, of course, about lowering the cost of prescription drugs and just overall reducing the amount of healthcare spending by eliminating the profiteering of the current healthcare system. The profiteering of current healthcare system really gets to people as we would imagine it would, right? We're putting profits over people's healthcare. And they see it, they know it, they're infuriated and angered by it. And so when you ask people what do they dislike the most, it always comes back to costs. And the most unpopular thing about our current healthcare system is that premiums and deductibles are too high, that they can't afford to pay for healthcare. Now here's the work that we need to do as we design our ongoing strategy and campaign for building support. Surprisingly, I was surprised that most voters are actually largely satisfied with their own insurance policies. And I've got a lot of theories about this, and you probably do too. And some of the corporate brands do fairly well. Believe it or not, people still like United Healthcare. So we have work to do to really explain to people what United Healthcare is and why they should be enraged at United Healthcare, because that is one of the villains in the room along with Big Pharma. Now, in addition, what happened when we tested some of the most common attacks we hear against Medicare for All, support went away like that, very, very quickly. And it quickly took it to under 50% approval. And so we lost a lot of people the minute we just even said some of the lies and attacks that are lobbied against Medicare for All. And so the fluid nature of that support and the ability for attacks to quickly undermine support tells me that we have work to do to actually help educate voters about what Medicare for All is, how it would work, what the components of it are, and why it is not going to be what they are being told by these huge corporations that pour enormous amounts of money into these attack ads. And it tells me that we need to better define who the villains are of our broken healthcare system. So that is some of the work that we are going to undertake, is trying to go deeper into some of these questions so that we can start to do really on the ground work with people to figure out how to best talk about this and how to best move some of the attitudes so that when we are pushing for Medicare for All or for any of the components of expanded Medicare, we are actually able to sustain the progress we make. Because so many of my colleagues will tell me, I believe in a Medicare for All system, but I don't want to be attacked by all those corporate ads that come in, you know, tens of millions of dollars of corporate ads or hundreds of millions of dollars of corporate ads. And I think we need to do the work to actually build the resilience of the support for single-payer healthcare. So that is going to be one of the pieces that we start working on, and we will share all of that with you as we continue to do this work, really talking to people on the ground. So let's use the next few years to build this movement in 3 specific ways. And some of this is work for you, so take notes. Ready, Max? All right, because I got some work for the students here. So first of all, you know, we need to continue to run the coordinated campaigns across as many states as we can to educate more and target groups of voters with that new messaging and build that solid level of support. And I think that can be combined with door knocking on the ground campaigns, targeted social media, and other forms of advocacy, and it can be coordinated with your efforts to continue to pass resolutions in local jurisdictions and also efforts that build support for statewide single-payer initiatives. Second, we need to continue to build the support of major organizations, including medical organizations like the AMA, and PNHP and medical student organizers. You guys have played such a crucial role already in bringing the AMA closer than ever, at least by neutralizing their opposition to Medicare for All. Good job, everybody. That was really fantastic work. And I think we really need the medical community because they pour a lot of money in and they influence a lot of folks inside the halls of Congress, unfortunately. And so there are 2 big opportunities to address this, and I think of these as great organizing opportunities for all of you. And I think PNHP is the perfect organization to help lead this work and pull in as many coalition partners as possible. So the AMA Medical Student Advocacy Conference is March 6th to 7th, 2025 in Washington, D.C. I know you've got it on your calendar already. Let's have that be a key opportunity to do advocacy on the Hill, as well as to organize students in preparation to turn out as many people as possible for the AMA, for that conference, and then for the AMA House of Delegates Annual Meeting, which is June 6th to 10th of 2025, right here in Chicago. You ready for that? All right. Because this is really an opportunity to work towards drafting and passing resolutions to support the work and try to get the AMA, or at least push them in the direction of supporting Medicare for All and opposing our for-profit medical system. Third, we'll continue to do the work to get more and more members of Congress to sign on to Medicare for All, and we'll have a big introduction. I hope as many of you can come and join us for that when we do that next spring. Fourth, let's build support for policies that expand Medicare on the path to Medicare for All. So we're planning to introduce bills for key components of Medicare expansion, like lowering the eligibility age, adding dental, vision, and hearing. That will allow us to get more co-sponsors who might not be willing to sign on to Medicare for All, but they are willing to actually push for these individual pieces. And so tonight is really a call to action. It's a thank you, and it's a let's get to work again. Because these ideas, I hope, will just be food for thought. You'll come up with better ones, more creative ones, or you'll implement some of these in the ways that you see fit. But you play an incredibly important role. And look, I'm not going to lie, this is going to be a very difficult time. And so I don't know what the next 4 years will bring. But what I do know as an organizer is that difficult times make good organizers. Strength emerges, in my experience, in the deepest times of crisis. And courage is not doing something when you are not afraid. It is actually doing something despite your fear. And so that's the work we have to do. And despite all of the challenges ahead, I know that this is a room that believes deeply and will work towards universal, comprehensive healthcare for every single person, for all of the pieces of healthcare, from reproductive health to long-term care, to no copays, no deductibles, no private insurance premiums, and of course, you know, for everybody in and everybody in. Everybody in. Thank you all so much for having me.
Okay, here's PNHP's triple aims again: end profiteering, improve traditional Medicare, and single payer. So we're supposed to, that was one of the things in a workshop I went to, is about how to gather a team together to visit with our legislators in town, to go see them and talk to them, about what we want them to do as regarding healthcare reform. So one thing is, there was a pro Medicare Advantage letter that came out a couple of years ago that a whole lot of senators signed on to, including Patty Murray, and I think Maria Cantwell did too. Then last year they tried to do it again. This is put out by the insurance industry group, and the PNHP and others were telling their senators not to sign on to this, so they never did put that. The insurance company lobbying group didn't publicize that and pass it around because they couldn't get, I think, less than half of senators to sign on to it. So the idea is this year they're probably going to try to do that again, and so be ready for that, to ask our legislators not to sign on to that one. And then
David, is that different from the previous alliance on like healthcare future or something like that? I don't know if you remember that alliance with all the big private health insurance giants.
I think it was put out by that health insurance lobby group.
I think it's AHIP.
AHIP, right?
Yeah.
So that's
the American Health Insurance
plans, I think.
Plans, yeah.
So if that comes up again, we got to talk to our senators not to sign on to it, but we want them to sign on to a Medicare Advantage accountability letter. And I don't know if that's been, formed yet, but the idea is to have a Medicare Advantage accountability letter that senators can sign on to instead. So this is in 2025, here's what we want to be doing. So meet with the newly elected legislators, congressional letters demanding Medicare accountability in January, February 6th, CMS draft of Medicare Advantage rates. Our forces were able to get the CMS to limit the increase in rates for Medicare Advantage this year, which the lobby was pushing to increase the rates paid for Medicare Advantage insurance companies. But who's at a CMS now? Mehmet Oz.
Not yet, but coming soon.
I should tell you, I have a connection with him. You want?
I'm not surprised.
No. Sister, who's a doctor and an alternative doctor, and I wrote a book called Surgery what is it? Surgery and its alternatives.
Yeah, good book. I read it.
It's a, what, 5, 6, 7, 800-page book. And on the sheet, Mehmet Oz, who was a friend of my sister's at the time, says, you got to read this book. But anyway. So here's the AHIP letters from Congress. Second quarter, these are things that we want to be targeting our advocacy on. Okay, now we want to complete 3,000 surveys on moral injury, build more relationship with legislators. So you can look at this later. So
yeah, I think the big takeaway from this for me during the meeting was really just focusing our efforts at like a particular time in year when CMS is looking to finalize these rates. And it's pretty amazing like what some like key advocacy groups, PNHP included, were able to do in the last year with targeted advocacy directly to elected officials in making sure that Medicare Advantage plans don't really just like milk Medicare, the Medicare fund for as much as they want to. And I don't know if this is in a subsequent slide, but the overall effect was nipping into the profits of these Medicare Advantage companies on the order of like a few, I think tens of billions of dollars in profits that directly were avoided, I guess. And also like the subsequent dip in the stock market value as well. So advocacy works, and as long as the timing is right, then it can have a huge impact.
Of course, I don't know if you remember, but the mainstream press pushed that as Congress proposes to cut Medicare reimbursement. That's how they spun that deal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it could be like a powerful campaign as well, and just really making sure people understand what Medicare Advantage is, right? So I know there's been like talk in lots of at least healthcare advocacy circles of calling it Medicare Disadvantage, but I think there's also a lot of advantage in calling it for what it is, which is like private Medicare plans. And I think that in and of itself like is really could be like a good targeting tool to ensure that people know that, okay, this is actually a private plan. It's not necessarily like just the US government funding these plans.
So here's that.
Many of us old folks, go ahead, Dave. I was going to say many of us older folks remember what happened when the Clinton plan collapsed. And that's when the for-profit HMOs surged into the market. And they just dang near destroyed healthcare in Minnesota and New York State with that. And so what Medicare Advantage really is, it's a for-profit HMO. They get a capitated payment and they make money off of doing less for patients, which personally I think is immoral.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see a surge in Medicaid Advantage plans as well, or private Medicaid plans as well, which, you know, we're currently on as medical students at the University of Washington, which has been like a pretty amazing shift in the last 10 years when previously the state of Washington was financing these healthcare plans, financing and managing these plans and doling out benefits. But now we have coordinated care. Now we have, I think there's Molina Healthcare. I think there's over 11 private for-profit entities that are managing Washington state Medicaid plans. And I think the same is across the country as well.
Yeah, they've been around a long time. They're management corporations. So what they do is they contract out the management of the plans, and whether or not they change the scheme or not, but whenever you interject an intermediary like that, somebody's taking money right out of the coffers, which should go for patient care.
So Mike,
Mike, you've had your hand raised.
Yeah, two things. One bill that many of us would want introduced in the first quarter is the HR 6270, the State-Based Universal Healthcare Act. And to make it advertise it as an important adjunct to national Medicare for all. So we're trying to catch Pramila Jayapal's ear. Didn't quite do it at the PNHP meeting. Didn't quite do it last hour because I was on that call and I had registered to ask a question. But maybe David can at least make her think about it again. David McClanahan. That's one thing. And the other is that, as you may know, Connecticut stopped its private control of Medicaid 14 years ago or more, and noticed a drop in their overhead by 14%. And they've kept it all these, 14 years. Maine also has protections like that. So others of us can do that too. Get the private enterprise out of our Medicaid system.
Well, one last takeaway that I got was that PNHP can continue keeping improved Medicare for all as the North Star, but you know, there are other people who are working on incremental things, and we should not attack them for doing that, and you know, see what they're doing and not necessarily give a whole lot of resources to help with something that we see as incremental. But if we see it as incremental, you know, we can certainly help work on it also. And I think there was a lot of talk about that in the board meeting and elsewhere, that we can't be purists now, and we have to be able to work in a bigger tent, but not compromise our values, our integrity, but they have to think about pragmatism a bit too. Did you feel that, Hugh?
Yes, I thought it was sure a softer opinion by the leadership about state-based issues. And I agree with you what you said previously. Rather than opposing it, they're just not endorsing it actively.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really interesting insight, because you know, in years past we've had like breakout sessions about specifically about coalition building, and you know, I think that's something that I for one feel like we've done like a decent job with, and up here in Washington State with all of the different organizations in the Pacific Northwest region. But there's always more that we can be doing to support their causes and uplifting their voices, because you know, at the end of the day, we're working towards health and justice. And how we go about that is up to individual interpretation. But as long as we're moving forward, you know, we're making progress, right? Mike?
Yeah. Regarding this comment about supporting some incremental steps, I think we've talked about that a long time. This year, it's has a different flavor because the Trump administration will be attacking the Affordable Care Act. And people will look to us and say, are you not going to defend us? Are you not going to protect the Affordable Care Act? And we know it was a giveaway to the insurance industry. And so we don't like that. On the other hand, people are going to be losing their Medicaid access. And we have to show them that we are trying our best to help them keep their access to healthcare. It's going to be a fine edge to walk.
I think I have to drop off, everyone. Good to see you all, though.
I think we're about finished here. But one other thing I was trying to figure out how to formulate was you know, healthcare justice is good, but there's lots of other things that affect people's lives that are somewhat interrelated, but we have to be concerned about those and be able to work on those and help the groups that are specifically focused on those other things that are affecting people's lives so much. And this is probably one of the reasons why so many people who are disadvantaged voted for Trump. We got to figure out how to reach those people. All right, are we about ready to call it a day?
Yeah.
All right, David, thanks a lot for putting all that together.
Yeah.
I'll as I said, I'll get out a meeting report and the links to those, I think 5 slideshows and whatever else, because those slideshows are really good. You can go over them slowly by yourself because they all have great information and can help, educate.
I just wanted to plug really quick that the UW School of Medicine SNaHP chapter, we're going to be hosting a lunch and learn on getting into the nitty-gritties of healthcare, of the current mechanisms of healthcare financing and how messy it is on December 5th from noon to 1 p.m. with Dr. Jake Berman. So we'll send out an announcement for that.
Okay, we can help blog that one.
What school is that?
University of Washington.
Oh, good for you.
So it won't be online, right?
On the 5th?
It's going to be on the 5th, and we're going to have it on Zoom. It's just too much to try to coordinate everyone. So we're just going to have a make your own lunch and learn.
Well, if you have it on Zoom, you can record it and make it, we can put it on our website. All right, great. So when I count to 0, I will end the meeting.
Good night.
9, 8.
Okay, good night. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
3, 2, 1. Bye-bye.
Bye.